Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm the head of engineering here at Rubio, and I want to walk you through NodeScript. So, when you first log into NodeScript, you're going to be met with a screen similar to this one. Here you can see in the left, you have your graphs, endpoints, schedules, variables, etc. And here in the middle, it's where you're going to have all your graphs. As of right now, I don't have any. So we can either get a quick starting guide or just jump into a new graph. And that's what I'm going to be doing. I can just give my graph a name from here, or I can just even use a slash to create folders and organize myself. So I can say something like, this is my first graph. And I can say this is in a folder called tutorial. There you go. So when I create my graph, you're going to see that this reflects right here on the top where it says tutorial slash this is my first graph. If I go back here, now you can see that I have a graph and it's inside a folder called tutorial, and this is my first graph. Now back to our graph. If you see here, we just have an infinite blank canvas, and this can be either daunting or very exciting. Before we jump into the canvas, let's look into the things that we have here. So here on the left, you can see you can set up your inputs, your outputs, and even install some libraries. You can also rename your graph. So if I come here to the graph's name, I can change this from this is my first graph to something like this is my graph. I can also give it a description, some keywords that will make it easier finding it if I have dozens and dozens of graphs. As of right now, I don't care for any of that, so I'll just click save. You can see my graph has changed name. Here on the right, we have this eye icon that will allow me to switch if I want to see all the outputs of my nodes or only the ones that I'm focused on. For now, I'll leave it disabled. I only want to see the ones that I'm active on. Here you see the people who are working on this graph. So in this case, there's only me, but if there were multiple people, you would be able to see all of them in here. I can also click here to publish my graph. So it even tells me, hey, you're missing the output. We'll get into that. I can set the version using semantic versioning, give some notes, export it as a public module, or even expose it as a HTTP endpoint. And here on the bottom, we have some tips. So if you're not super familiar with NodeScript, you can see all the things that you can do, all the shortcuts, and even go to the docs if you need to. So now let's get started. Let's create our first nodes. You can create a node by either right-clicking, and you're going to have a tab with all the nodes that you can use, and there are quite a few. Or you can just click space, and that will open the same tab for you. In this case, let's do something very simple. I want to add two numbers. So I can come here and search for math, and I can see all the functions that I can use. Or I can just say add. And here we go. I have an add node, which I can use to add two numbers. Now, how do I give it two numbers? Well, I can just click space again and write number, and it will give me a node that outputs a number. And here I can give any numbers. I can give 5. And as you can see, the output of it is 5. If I link it to this next node, you see that it's giving the output of this node as an input to this node. So here, if I just copy and paste this node, I can change this to 2. Oh, actually 3. And give it as an input. Here you can see I'm outputting 3, I'm outputting 5, and giving that as an input. So if I add both 3 and 5, I'm going to get 8. And that's the output of my add node. That's really cool. But what do I do with this? Well, now you can give that as an output. So as you saw when we tried to publish, it was complaining that we had no output. So let's just open here and go into output. This is the output node. It's the final node on any graph. This way you can just give that output to another graphs if you're creating a module, or you can use that as the response on your HTTP request. In this case, I'm not going to do any of those up right now. So as you can see, the output of my graph is 8. Now, I want to make this graph a little bit more generic. I want to be able to tell what are the two numbers that I want to add. I don't want it to have to set it as 5 and 3. To do that, I can just come here in the inputs and click add input. And here I can say I want to have the input name A, and that's going to be a number. I can add this input. And in here, I can give it a value that's going to be used for my graph. But if I want to give it a default value, I can also give it in here. I can also say that it's optional or that's nullable, or even some advanced options that we're not going to go into today. That's looking good for me. Now I'm going to create a second one. That's going to be my B, and it's also going to be a number. Now, if I click here and say input, you see that I have my inputs. That is going to create a node with all the inputs that I have in my graph, or I can just get the input A or input B. In this case, I'm going to get input A. You see that defaults to 0. Since it's a number, it has to be a valid number. And for that, we default to 0. So if I link it in here, and now if I get my input B, I can also link it. And as you can see, when I link the B into my add, it also disconnects the numbers. So I can just remove these guys. Now you can see our output is 0. That's not really great. We can give it some values. So if I go back here and say that my A is 5 and my B is 3, you see that it adds up to 8, just as we had before. Now the cool thing is that we can actually expose this as an HTTP endpoint, and we can receive any values that we want. So I'm just going to click here on publish, and in here I'm going to expose it via HTTP. I'm going to make it a GET request so I can call it directly from my browser, and I'm just going to call it first graph. I'm going to add a slash in the beginning. As you also saw it gave me the default option for a URL that was a path to my graph. So it was tutorial, a slash, this is my first graph, or in this case now, this is my first, it's grap. Just realized I had a typo there. You probably caught that one earlier than I did. But all right, I can also set the version if I want. For now, since it's the initial one, it's going to default. But when I click publish here, you're going to see it lets me know that it was published, the version 0.0.0, and I can copy the URL. And if I come here now, I can set my semantic versioning. So if I want to publish a patch, a minor, or a major version, it allows me to select. Okay, so let's give it a try. So if I open a new tab here and paste the URL that I just got, I get a 0. Why did I get a 0? Didn't I have a 5 and a 3 in here? Well, as I mentioned, these are not the default values for these inputs. These are only the values that I'm using in this graph right now, but not on the HTTP endpoints. These are only for testing. I can, as I mentioned, use the default values, or I can provide those inputs in my URL. Since we're using a GET request, I'm just going to do some query params here. So I can say A is equal to 3, equal to 3. And I can say that B is equal to 4. Isn't equal. Okay, so this should give me a 7. Let's see if it works. There we go. We got our result. Hopefully you guys can see it, but we got a 7 here. I know this may sound a bit silly and way too simple, but trust me, NodeScript is so powerful. If you go through all of the options and all the nodes that you can add, you'll see that you can do pretty much anything you need with NodeScript. Hope you guys enjoyed getting to know NodeScript a little bit more, and I see you guys in the next one.